Good morning. Welcome to Brave Indigenous Conversations with Joan Jack. And this morning I'm going to be joined shortly by Lowa Beebee. And before Lowa joins us, I'd like to begin the podcast with a piece of writing by Mickey Scott B. Jones, An Invitation to a Brave Space. Together we will create brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Again, that's Mickey Scott B. Jones. Awesome. So I see that Lowa has joined me already. I'm going to add her to the stream.
Good morning.
Good morning. So amazing. I just love this technology.
Good to
So
see you.
I know, right? So let's start with having you introduce yourself.
So I'll speak in Blackfoot. Oki, Mr. Wanako Knatui Saugasam, Bikani Nadokdotu, Gigana. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lowa Beebee, and I'm from Southern Alberta, the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Bikani and Kainai First Nations, and I'm so honored to be here, Joan.
It's a thrill to have you. Can you just share a little? I mean, I know you. I was telling somebody was asking me this morning, so who's your guest today? And I said Lowa Beebee, and they said, oh, I don't know her. So if somebody would know you, what should they know about you?
So let's see. As I say in my bio, I wasn't feeling so much older. I am a full-time student, so I'm finishing my MBA. I have three more assignments. I finished my lecture classes, so I'm doing that. I've been doing that for a while. But I do have a show as well, and I've invited you to that show, the Lowa Beebee Show. I'm also currently I work in consulting services, Indigenous services and consulting for MNP. I do a bit of consulting work in different areas, and then I also a facilitator. Last night I emceed a gala here. I'm actually calling in from the River Cree in Enoch First Nation, and I do several things. So I'm not sure not sure exactly where to say. In the past, I worked for the Assembly of First Nations. I've worked for First Nations law firm, TELUS Communications for 11 years, in the mobility side as well. So I've had a vast background in different areas: media, communications, strategy, politics, those types of things. Yeah.
Can you share a bit about your involvement in the Calgary Stampede?
Ooh, the Calgary Stampede. Currently, I am a vice chair for the Elbow River Council First Nations events. In the past, I was the past chair. My family has been involved with the Calgary Stampede going back right to 1912. My great grandmother's teepee, and then my grandparents, Joe and Josephine Proshu Sr., they were teepee owners. And then today, my traditionally adopted sister, Deborah, that's the TP I belong to, TP 18. And then my uncle, Reg and Rose Crowshoe, they're also TP owners. So we, the Treaty 7 Nations, have 26 families that put up their camp every year, the Elbow River Camp. And I will say for several decades, going back to 1912, it's an authentic experience that, and a relationship with the Calgary Stampede where we showcase our way of life. We showcase the things that we do. And it's the Stoney Nakoda Nations of the Treaty 7 area, Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney. They're the Eahey Nakoda nations now. And then the Tsuut'ina Nation, which borders the city of Calgary, and then the three Blackfoot Confederacy nations, Piikani, Kainai, and Siksika. So we're really planning for that. Actually, after this, I do have another Stampede meeting that I'll be going to. Yes.
It, I have found it interesting. We've never really had talked about it, but why do you think in 1912 your ancestors your family decided to participate in, you know, a stampede. Why did you do that?
Well, I will say this, looking back in history and now knowing our history, because I think there was, on all of our nations when we were growing up, there was just a silence, and I'll even say an unknowing of the oppression and suppression that we're living through. In 1912, Guy Weedick had to bargain with and convince the Indian agents of the area, because every one of our First Nation reserves were being governed by an Indian agent under the Indian Act. And so he had to bargain that they would come. We had to have a pass. The pass system was in place. And so we were allowed to leave our nation, and we're allowed to express and show our culture. That is something that I will say all Treaty 7 nations are very proud of. And I don't think, I know this is why some of our culture stayed intact, as well as our Sundance continued through that time. So there was a force of, and I'll even say, particularly from the Blackfoot nations, currently today we are the largest First Nation group in Alberta. So I can imagine the Blood Tribe itself is the largest land-based First Nation in Canada. So I can imagine one Indian agent unable to stop our Sundance and those types of things from going on. But a lot of our ceremonies and things were happening underground. So I really think it was that. The other thing that I've done a lot of work with the executive and some of the staff these last few years, it really is a relationship. If we do not have a trusting relationship, we're not going to be going there. So, from the outside, there's different facets of the Calgary Stampede that people have looked at and have scrutinized and have wondered. And oftentimes people don't understand that relationship that has taken place. And of course, it's had its bumps and things and challenges along the way, but it's still happening. Yeah.
Wow, you shared so much there. So I'm not saying this is right, but it's just how it occurred to me that in your sharing, your presence there, I don't know, I was going to say juxtaposed or alongside, um, touched in me a place of the original intent of the treaties, which was
Mhm.
to live together, in mutual respect and mutual benefit, which
Mhm.
is not what has manifested. But your
Yes.
ancestors had the foresight to see the value in the symbolism of this work they're doing, with the public. People come to the Calgary Stampede from all over the world.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
did that occur for me properly? Like, did that
Yes,
enter their
for
thinking?
sure, for sure. And a lot of the staff that I've spoken to in this last year, I have told them that they've inherited that relationship, and that relationship needs to be respected, understood, and it needs to be worked on. The
Mhm,
relationship over the years, when you have two cultures coming together, and then you have the three cultures, because the Treaty 7 nations don't all speak the same culture. You have the Ehe Nakota nations, Tsuut'ina, and then the Blackfoot Confederacy. You have those things going on, and then you have our Eurocentric culture as well.
mm,
So that is something that has not been easy,
mm,
and but it also is something that it has been great, and that's why we come back every year.
mm,
There's certain things that we work on, and then every year we come back. But for sure, that is when you think about the some of the intent of a treaty or an agreement, or a way of life to live together. I could see that for sure.
mhm. So, this is really powerful. The unknowing, you used the word unknowing. I had never heard that word before the moment you spoke it. And so, in choosing to continually be present, uh, through thick or thin,
Mhm.
with those who organize the Calgary Stampede, you're creating a space of knowing, because
Mhm.
prime not primarily, like, I think at the core of our challenge as Indigenous people in our own homelands is that we are still invisible
Mhm.
and not seen.
For sure.
Um, marginalized, not heard, blah, 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 blah. I'm not supposed to say blah, blah, but
You can say anything you want.
there's no way to describe what's going on except as blah, blah, blah. So I see a value too in the knowing that
Yes.
there are Indigenous people in these lands, because the stampede could continue fine without your presence,
Yes.
and
Yes.
in your presence, you create a knowing for
Mhm.
everyone who comes through. And there's been you also said some other things. I made notes that I'll circle back to, but there's also a perspective out there. And I think I'm very grateful that you and I know and trust each other enough that anything I say is from my heart. And I apologize in advance if I'm rude, but I'll
I'm
just share a
proud
story.
you're rude.
Oh, sweetheart. I'll just share a story. The whole wooden Indian thing, like I've struggled with that as an Indigenous person, and the why should we share, who we are? And then during the Olympics, the four nations in British Columbia that were involved in um, setting up the Olympics in their space created that opportunity for all of nations to come and dance. And I was watching that happen. And I don't know how long it was, but it was long. Like,
Mhm.
let's just say it was 15 minutes. I don't know. But so I'm sitting in my home in Manitoba, and watching the Olympics and watching that event. And I'm watching it, and watching all the people dancing. And then at first I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And then I'm like, oh my God, we're interrupting this whole process. And then I'm like,
Oh
oh
yeah,
my
no.
God, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. And that experience triggered in me uh er, deeply internalized cultural self-hate, around, yeah,
Exactly.
we want to be seen, but I don't want you to look at me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, in going there are going to be some people, I'm sure you could speak to it better than me, that come to the Stampede and come through, your village, your homes, your teepees as a very superficial tourist experience. And
Exactly.
then I'm sure there's some that come through and have a very profound awakening to
Yeah.
our presence. Is there
Exactly.
anything you could share about that?
Yes, well, a lot of things came to my mind when you were talking about, and I believe it was Five Nations for the Olympics. What
Mm,
I will say, because I also wanted to share, is that I do a lot of training with non-Indigenous people, and I always tell them today there are still our ceremonies that are in private that do not the public does not see. So we have our I'll say sweat lodges. I think is the most common term. We have our Sundance. We have in my culture our all night smokes. There's different types of ceremonies that take place, and the public does not see them. In BC, there's the potlatch, those types of things. So I will say the Stampede is not a place where we publicly show those private things that have specific protocols around them, right?
mm,
So we don't have those types of ceremonies that take place that the public comes and sees.
mm,
The one thing I'll say in the relationship is we share what we want to share. So currently, you see powwows that are taking place, across the country in the United States, and those things everyone is welcome to. So those are the types of things you'll see. I know we have over 50 programs that we run during that time. Last year, the Calgary Stampede hosted a competition powwow that was open to all people that compete in powwow, and this year it will happen again. I believe they're giving away $200,000 in competition money, and that's going to be happening outside of the camp in the Saddle Dome like it did last year. And so it's the programming that takes place is something that the TP owners of the 26 families approve of or don't approve of. So
mm,
in our cultures, our elders or those that are knowledge keepers approve of certain things that are allowed to be shown and shared. So that is the way that the relationship goes, not without its scrutiny. Over the years, I remember growing up when I was a young girl, and I was involved in powwow. I was involved, growing up in my grandparents' home, and ceremonies and all types of things were going on. And way back then, we were scrutinized for being involved in our ceremonies, by our own people, and because of the residential school system and our residential school past. So to see today the total difference of being, and expressing who you are in your culture and that type of thing, it's come a long way in the decades that it's been there. But I will say, with the Olympics, I am very proud in their traditional territory, just like our traditional territory, in the city of Calgary, which we call Mokinstis, that people are asserting themselves within their own territories. This is what we're going to do. This is our traditional territory that we did not surrender, whether it was through a treaty or whether it is through a modern treaty. Especially those modern treaties, I'm very proud of. And the Olympics was not going to happen in the traditional territory without those leaders having the same type of recognition as the current leaders that have been here, less than 150 years. We've got to remember how young Canada is, and how I am myself 2 generations away from when my people hunted the buffalo and lived off of this land. So I'll say that it's come a long way, and I think this country has come a long way, and we're still on that journey. Yeah.
Totally. Amazing. I just want to circle back to some of the things you said. Um, the TPI belong to, you said.
Hmm.
So can you talk about that? Share with us what did you mean when you said that the
Well,
TPI?
there's 26 families, and I'll say within our TP circle, there's numbers. So we're there. So TP 18,
Okay,
and that's
literally at the Calgary Stampede, there are numbers to
yeah.
locate people. Okay.
So the accreditation that I'm given to go in and out of the gates will say TP 18 on it.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, so that's something that the Stampede has come up with to identify those 26 families, and
So the
the
26
families
families,
adopted.
yeah, the 26 families though are 20 26 distinct families that have what you've shared. They've decided to be there, and they are
Yeah,
there in their own
yeah,
right and
yeah,
sharing what they choose to share.
yeah.
Is and I loved how you made it so clear that there's like there's like everyday sort of social interaction information that we share
Yes,
freely, and
freely.
then there's sacred information, that
Yeah,
that I know in some of the ceremonies I've been to, it's not that non-Indigenous people aren't there, but they're only there by invitation. Like you just don't pick
exactly,
up and park your
exactly.
car and go to the powwow. And
Yes,
so,
you are
whereas
invite only.
yeah,
Yeah,
whereas a powwow, and I think that's a major thing. Like, I wish Canadians would get that they don't need an invitation to a powwow. Like,
exactly, exactly.
generally, I've never heard of a powwow that's really by, unless it's like a legal, for a legal purpose, like in the white law they would say like an estates distribution powwow,
Yeah.
where someone has passed, and there's, but even then, I bet you people, if they wandered in, would end up being a part of the estate distribution. I can't imagine
Well,
anybody. Go
I
ahead.
will I will say I've even gone through this journey where, and I'm sure everyone has had this same journey, that have been involved in, things within our community and things outside our community. I will even say land acknowledgements, that,
Mm,
is something that sprung from our culture, which people have a hard time wrapping their brain around. And so growing up, in the way that I did, and the exposure that I had, when I started to see people from outside our culture come to certain things, it put me off. It put
mm.
me off when I started to see that. But the one thing I say today is that if you are invited to specific things that are closed to the public, know that you are doing a very good job in your relationship building.
Ah,
Then I tell them, because people ask me, well, what do I do? What do I bring? And I tell them, whoever invited you is your
yeah,
guide, and
yeah,
you ask them and you
exactly.
lean on them. Then when you get to the ceremony, you lean on the person or the people that are running the ceremony.
Mm. Yeah.
So I think that my whole life I have shared things, particular things in my culture, not my entire culture, with those that are from around the world. The Stampede has
Mm.
given me that opportunity. And then I started working at the Buffalo Jump in Southern Alberta. That's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so a UN dedicated heritage site for 5 years. And so I was used to, and our main visitors then at that time were one third was from Germany,
Mm.
one third was from Japan, and the other third was from the United States. We had very little local people coming.
My
And
God.
so sharing my culture outside has been something that I have heard it all, seen it all. There's no surprises to me. You know, when I was working at the Buffalo Job, people were coming there thinking we still lived in teepees. And I'll even say today, still at the Stampede, people show up and they still think that we always, you know, year round are living in teepees and we're still living off the land. So the more that we share and take our own voices and share our own culture, we're doing that, and other people are not telling our story. Like
Mm.
from the arrival of the settlers, people have been telling our story. They've been speaking for us. They've been saying those things and trying to interpret things in our cultures, and it's been humorous, especially look at Hollywood. And
Yeah.
then it's been fueling the angry Indian myth. The media has done us a disservice as well. So I think this is our time, not only with the Stampede, but across Canada and North America, to start telling our stories in an authentic way, to really share who we really are and dispel those myths that are out there.
Awesome. Yep, totally. Another thing you mentioned in your opening remarks or opening share when you started sharing was about the pass system. Now, I know
Mhm.
what the pass system is, but I'm
Yeah.
thinking some of our listeners might not know what the pass system is. So I'd like to invite you to share your understanding of the pass system.
Yes, well, the pass system was something that came about out of the Indian Act. And the Indian Act is a law, and I'll say I'm using the word Indian as a historical sense, and I don't encourage people to use that word. And I think that and the reason why I even say the Indian Act too is that the Indian Act still exists today. And I'll say the Indian Act is still infringing on our human rights
Mm.
as Indigenous people in Canada. So the Indian Act came about in 1876, and when they were working on conquering and trying to get us to submit to treaties, as the Royal Proclamation of 1763 from England, King George III put out in 1763, that we existed. So in the Royal Proclamation, they identified that we existed as Indigenous people in Canada, and that we would need to surrender our land under treaty, and then that would get access to the land for them to settle the land, for them to really take our land, is what they were doing. And what they were doing early on is that they were identifying Indian rebels. So I'll say our leaders, our leaders, they were identifying Indian rebels, and they were charging them with treason, and they were throwing them in jail.
Mm.
And one that people might know today is Chief Palm Maker, who was signatory to Treaty 6. And it became so successful, the charging of treason and throwing in jail, and they were using that pass system at first just for those Indian rebels. So those Indian rebels had this pass system where they were not allowed to leave specific areas. So under the Indian Act is where they put the pass system, pertain to everyone that was considered an Indian. And we were put on reserve lands after they got us to surrender and sign a treaty. They put us on reserve lands and segregated us from society. So we were segregated from society, which people are still learning today. And I'll even say our own people too are still learning that we were segregated from society and forced to stay on reserve lands. In order to leave those reserve lands, the Indian agent was given the power over the pass system. And we had to go to the Indian agent and say, I'm going to go visit my relative over here, or I'm going to go hunt in my traditional territory. I'm going to go pick berries. You had to have a specific reason. And the Indian agent wielded their power, and each reserve had one Indian agent, and they wielded their power inconsistently. And they had the power to say, no, you're not going to go anywhere, which I know my grandparents, my grandfather has a book out called Weasel Tale, and right in that book he was telling a story, and he wasn't telling the story like it was something that he was being oppressed on. He was just saying, oh yeah, the Indian agent didn't allow me to do this. And so even reading those words today could bring tears to my eyes to understand what my family had to live through.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, over the years, had to ask permission. And then I will say in 1939, the Indian Association was formed. And my grandfather, Howard Beebee Sr., was one of the founding members, with members from Treaty 6, 7, and 8. And the first thing that they went after was the pass system, infringing on our rights.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe it was in 1951 where it was fully repealed. They then went after the residential school system. In the residential school system as well, we're only allowed to go to grade 8. Mm-hmm. So you have us today in 2023 with us only participating in Canadian society in the last few decades.
Yeah, it's so new.
So you can imagine the systemic issues that we have come about to have with the many layers. But that's just the pass system, and it is hurtful. The first time I saw an actual replica of a document of, well, really a picture of pass system was in Ottawa in the archives, and it was quite emotional to see. I know we've lived it, we've survived it. I know we're proud of who we are as people, but to look back in our history and know that existed is really some of the things that I know drives me to do the things that I do today. Yeah. And yourself too. I
No. It's all good.
That I have looked up to for so long. Yeah.
So kind. You brought to memory so a couple of things happened. Like you created an opening for me to, and I just want to flag it so I don't forget about, the settler or white people, and I'm always upset. Like, how come you don't know this? So I want to circle back to that after, like the why people don't know. But for now, I wanted to share a short story. So this, for those of you listening, like this is lived memory for our people, living memory. Like one of my husband's uncles, who I had the honor of knowing, for the last sort of 30 years of his life kind of thing, used to always tell me this story about when him and his chum, when they were in their 20s, because it also used to be against the law for a registered Indian to consume alcohol.
Yes.
And so they had gone out and gotten some booze from somewhere, and they had left the reserve without permission. And in my husband's community, the Indian agent was also the justice of the peace for the whole town or whatever. So the Indian agent, so he said they were trying to sneak back home, to the reserve, and they were half cut, and they bumped into the Indian agent, who was out patrolling with a flashlight. And he used to do have physical actions. When he told me the story, he shone his flashlight at us. He said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Who told you could leave, the reserve, eh?" And he said, "We're just out drinking." And he said, "Well, you're not supposed to drink. You can't drink." And then he got kind of mad, naturally, and he gestured like he was gonna. He said, "Boy, I'm gonna just get you," And the Indian agent, who was also the JP, said, "If you hit me, I'm gonna fine you," because he was the JP, eh? And so my uncle said, I told him, "How much?" And he said, $50, which way back then was a lot of money, eh? He said, "Okay, I'll take it." And he just knocked out. And so the resistance is real. The resistance,
Yes.
and in general, I have never confirmed this fact, but I was told that uh, groups of people came from South Africa to study the Indian Act reserve system that Canada had put in place, and then went home and created apartheid,
Hmm.
because the way we were living is like apartheid until
Hmm.
1951. And
Yeah.
so, in effect, like literally, of course, there's all kinds of personal experiences in that spectrum.
Well, yes, like when you say personal experiences, this really is our
Yeah.
lives. This is our lives. This is not centuries ago. This is in our lifetime. The one thing that I did not say about the past system is you were thrown in jail if you
Mm,
were caught off the nation. You
mm,
were totally thrown in jail.
yeah,
And then the Indian Act still exists. They've only updated certain. The last update was August 2021. It is
yeah,
something that still oppresses us and suppresses us as people.
yeah. We have a bit of time left, so let's just really be brave. Let's just jump right into, one of the conversations is that's common in our community is around, um, well, so why do you want the Indian Act then? Why do you
Mhm.
want the Indian Act?
Mhm.
Like, why do you hang on to it?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that? Let's talk about that.
Well, I wouldn't say I want the Indian Act. I think, especially the treaty nations, the historical treaties, and one I belong to, Treaty 7, we're waiting for our treaties to be fulfilled. That's really, and the Canadian government at the time put out this Indian Act really to control us, because that's where they made it legal for them to steal our children and put them into residential schools. They made it legal to put the pass system in place. And our first constitution did not have clauses for human rights. you know
Mm,
and then there's a whole many facet story of how the 1982 constitution came about and distinctly identified the Métis people, the Inuit, and the First Nations people within that. So I think that signing a treaty, one, people try to understand, well, why did we sign it? It's very well known in Canada's historical documents that they were killing off our food source. They were killing off the buffalo to almost extinction.
mm,
And we did not need anyone to come and save us. There's that romanticized myth that they came and saved us. We're just kind of in the woods, living this life. But actually, we're highly developed people. We were living in harmony with nature. So I think that there does need to be something else. I don't know, Joan, in my older age now, I think I have come to peace with these things are not going to be settled in my lifetime.
yeah,
I've come
and
to peace with that.
yeah,
I had so much strain over that, over growing up, in my years of growing up, especially with my grandpa Howard Beebee Sr. and the many things that he did. My aunt Regina Crowchild, who was Regina Beebee, the things that she even continues to do today. My uncle Howard Beebee Jr. And so picking up that on that, in our hereditary sense on the BB side, I was trying to work to decide what could I do and help here. And I have now come to understand it's not going to be in our lifetime. You
yeah,
know, and it's a difficult thing to finally come to understand it. But I
mm,
realize in the decades we've come a long way. We're still making strides, and as long as we're improving things, I think we're on the right road.
yeah. Like in it's like even if we just pick an arbitrary date like 1950,
Yeah.
so that's like 70 years. In 70 years, look how far we've come. I mean, it's not long that we've been really um, doing well. Our people always resisted, but I think with the advent of the new technologies and literally the internet and all of these things now have really plummeted us at warp speed into a position as Indigenous people where we can do a podcast. I mean, even, you know, even if one person listens to you and I talk this morning and their mindset is shifted, well, isn't that a good thing, you know?
Yes.
But I wanted to circle back to, I'm saying circle back a lot this morning. I wanted to come back to um, the whole idea of what do we do, you know, where I landed, when I really landed around that question, it was when I saw Oka happen. When I saw, I don't have the stats memorized, how much money the Canadian state spent to tell 78 people, Indigenous people, who had barricaded themselves behind, like had barricaded themselves to protect, you know, the graves of their ancestors, basically, from the expansion of a golf course, you know,
Hmm.
and were willing to put their lives on the line, and were joined by other Indigenous people outside their territory in that stand. And then I saw how much money the Canadian state was willing to spend to say, no, this is not your land.
Hmm.
This is not your land. And
Hmm.
bringing in the army and shooting at people, you know, like, so I've landed at, we don't have a big enough army.
Hmm.
Like, I understand, I get that this is our land. I understand that. I understand that. But like Chief Justice Dixon in the Dogamo case said, we are all here to stay.
Yeah.
Basically, he said, figure it out, you know, got to figure it out. And so there's strong opposition to figuring it out within the legal framework of the Canadian state. You know,
Yeah.
there are Indigenous people that are working at the global level in Geneva and, you know, at that level, but there are still even people within our communities that are resistant to, like, I met a Haida woman one time who said she sent back her social insurance, like, as she became aware, you know, of colonization, she sent back her social insurance and wrote a big long letter and said, no, I'm not in. And they sent it back to her and said, yes, you are actually, you know.
Hmm.
And so it's like being legally imprisoned within a, it's the way it is, it's the way it is. And there's a part of me that feels that, you know, accepting that is surrender, you know. So I'm working all the time to reframe that in my psyche, you know, around, okay, well, I've also landed on, I'm a practical sovereignist, you know.
Hmm.
If I do something that I believe is from the place of dependent is, which is I own myself, you know,
Yeah.
I own myself. If I do something from that place and it meets with resistance,
Hmm.
social legal resistance,
Yeah.
that's my reality. That's
Yeah.
my reality, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, is this the hill you're willing to die on? And
Yeah.
so, even when our people, and I am not saying take up arms or anything like that,
Yeah.
but even when our people are willing to die, to be seen, even just to be seen, never mind heard, you
Yeah.
know, like, before you can be heard, you have to be seen, and
Yeah.
seen as who you are, not as who you want me to be, you know,
Hmm.
what suits you to fit into your perspective, but to
Hmm.
see me as who I am as an Indigenous person, as who we are, even to get to that place, we're nowhere near there. Nowhere.
Well, yes, I agree. And the one thing I want to say is, when you talked about surrender, I wouldn't say in the perspective when I was saying I've come to peace with, I wouldn't say I've surrendered.
Okay.
I have come to peace. I have come to peace to, this is the reality
Yeah.
where it was hard to look at before and I didn't want to accept that that was the reality.
Mm.
One, the Indian Act is here. So what I have done and what I would like people to do um, is one, we have to take care of ourselves.
Mm.
So just in general, you see me drinking water. We need to eat healthy. We need to breathe. We need to be hydrating ourselves. We need to look after ourselves. And even in a spiritual sense, there needs to be some type of connection
Yeah.
to the spirit, and how are you doing that? And I have spent my entire life, I was very thankful to be one, born into a family that, and my grandfather being part of a sacred society and one of the leaders of that. And then on the other side, having my family, the Beebees, that were Catholics.
Mm,
And there was two sides of spirituality, and I've leaned into that spirituality for peace. And so I think that, one, what is that higher power that you are leaning into? And you can develop that at any point in time in your life. It's not something that is out there. And, if you were not born into something, or if you didn't start it as a child, or if you were not baptized, it does not mean those things. It means, what can I do now? And then look after yourself and look after the things that are around you, because it gets overwhelming. It gets overwhelming, and then you want to save the entire nation that you're on, then you want to save your tribal council, then you want to say, and you just get worn out, and your mental health starts to, it breaks you down.
mm,
And I think I have been there at times in my life where it has felt overwhelming.
yeah.
I have been there, and I'll say one of the things, I was the campaign manager for one of the hereditary chiefs, Miles Richardson, and I was very thankful. Traveled all over the country, went to many, many nations, especially in my time at the Assembly First Nations, and understanding what you can do and what everyone is doing. We're getting there. We're getting,
Mm,
there's
mm.
not one person that is going to, come and save us. It takes individuals, and then you do get connected with more individuals, and then you move that needle. And it's
Mm,
about, how far can I move that needle within my lifetime?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I think you hit on a real. I think I've landed where you've landed as well around sovereignty. The sovereignty starts in my soul. Sovereignty
Mhm.
starts in my heart, in my body.
Yeah.
And so, what am I doing to be sovereign and
Mhm.
have respect for my own self and
Yes.
have, health as best I can for myself?
Mhm.
And I tell people that all the time. Like, if you could just start by, like, yeah, it's true what you're saying about, colonization and all that stuff. And the reason for it is totally legitimate and whatever. Like, the reason you're drinking or drugging is completely understandable. And it's killing you, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
and you need to grab a hold of the sovereignty around your health.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, like I couldn't agree with you more. And I do my best. I still struggle with potato chips. Everybody knows I have a really bad chip addiction.
I had the same exact thing, and I kept thinking over the years. I went down. It was potato chips. I went down, down, down. It's been 2 weeks. I have stopped potato chips. I'm never
Oh,
picking them up again. Yeah, yeah. And I thought it was going to be my lifetime. I'm done.
I actually had 1 year of potato chip sobriety, but yeah, I'm
Oh
I'm
yeah, that's good. Well, let's hope I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
I'm in a period of controlled potato chip binging. Well, not even binging. I can limit myself now. So I mean, it sounds like we're belittling some really super important things, but it's not. It's
Yeah.
all the same. My dad would say, "Same shit, different pile, scruff." Like once you can spot that shit, you can smell it anywhere. And so whether it's the sovereignty of my nation or the sovereignty of myself in relation to my own body,
Yeah.
it's the same process. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to comment now because it's come up about the surrender thing. Um, so I said that, like, my understanding today of our worldview as Indigenous people is that the possibility, like the intellectual or philosophical or legal possibility that I could even separate myself from my land and surrender it to someone else
Oh, yeah.
outside of war, because we did have wars, we did have wars. There were tribal wars. Is not in our. It's not in our thing. It's not. I am my land. And
Yes.
so even where land. I've had the lived experience that even where there is history of a historical war having delineated a new boundary for two tribes, there are still people within each of those respective nations that still say, yeah, they live there now, but that's our land.
Well, yeah, see, even when you just laughed, I was actually going to say it's a funny concept. They believe they own the land.
Yeah.
It's not, especially in our spiritual ways, we know we were stewards of the land, right?
Mm.
We were stewards of the land. There was a respect we had for the land, and we still do. That's still there. And our traditional territories were our traditional territories. That was our specific boundary. And these treaties, when you think we didn't have those types of things, these pieces of papers really meant nothing to us. And so even though people believe they own specific land, in reality they don't. And
Mhm.
we know our natural laws, we know nature, we know those connections, and they believe that,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. I just tried a new thing here and added somebody's comment. They said, yes, at the moment we are fighting for land back at Grizzly Bear's Head.
oh,
Uh, yeah.
yes, I want to say this.
Go ahead.
There are hundreds of land claims that are currently outstanding in Canada, and
Yeah.
Canada has to put it out. So if they do a search, Canada and there's a specific claims website, they state exactly how many claims they've settled, which is over 1,000. I think there's currently 593 claims. It's shocking when Canadians hear there's 593 claims. What's more shocking is the billions upon billions of dollars that this Canadian government is spending to fight us for our human rights, healthcare,
Mhm.
education,
Yeah.
land claims,
Yeah.
and other areas.
Yeah.
And it's all human rights. It's all
Yeah.
human rights.
It is.
And this Canadian government is spending my tax dollars, because
Yeah.
people act like we don't pay tax. We do. And I always tell Canadians, is it okay with you that the Canadian government is spending billions of dollars when they could settle? They
Yes.
could settle these claims. They could settle these specific claims, and they are spending time and spending dollars, and they have unlimited resources, it seems, and they can continue this fight.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because people act like 1876. Oh yeah, it was a different world. Today you guys have this. No, we're still fighting,
Yeah.
and we're fighting in the courts, and the courts are the Dalgamut case you talked about.
Yeah.
The courts are ruling in our favor because
Yeah.
they're,
So that's another weirdo thing,
yeah,
that, on the one hand, we have perception that they mostly gather from the 6 o'clock news around what the government is doing. And,
yeah,
we have leaders that are very skilled at messaging reconciliation and, oh, aren't we good to our Indians, like, oh my God, pat Canada on the back, when actually that's not actually what's happening on the ground. You could take any number of situations, like current situations, like the report for the inquiry from the murdered and missing Indigenous women. There's no money hitting the ground. I don't know where that money's going.
yeah,
Even the Jordan's principle, I get contacted by people all the time that, I'm not getting the help I need, like
yeah,
it's not reaching the people. So
yeah.
you've got that. I think the issue is with the bureaucracy and the uninformed. I'm feeling generous today. The uninformed attitudes of those, who work in those bureaucracies. So the Supreme Court of Canada, I think I got to get better at memorizing stats because it's so impressive. But like, I'll just say this: somebody can correct me if that's their strength. Let's just say 90% or even higher of the court cases that around our human rights as Indigenous people, that make it to the Supreme Court of Canada after spending billions of dollars on legal fees,
Millions.
all their kids and paying their mortgages and all these, like it's big, oppressing us is a form of economic development. It's big business. Keeping us oppressed is big business.
Oh, for
Jail,
sure.
jails, social workers,
For
lawyers, like there's
sure.
all kinds of people feeding their children from our oppression. Anyways, oh my God, I digress. So we go all the way to the Supreme Court. We win. We win.
We win.
We win. The Supreme Court, there was 9 or however many judges.
When you're talking about Jordan's principle, it's the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal.
Yep.
Like how many orders? It's well over 50 orders since
Oh,
20
way. Yeah. No,
that
and
the
it's
government
changing
has.
every day.
Yes, that the government is violating every day.
Yeah,
And
every
there's
day.
another order. There's another order. There's
Oh,
another. How many
so
billions of dollars is
there's
that?
this phenomenon where we win, whether it's at the Supreme Court of Canada or through human rights tribunals, and then the winning decision is not given effect on the ground.
No. Yeah.
What's with that, Canada?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a question for the Canadians who all work in these bureaucracies. Why? And then they all have, oh, well, I'm not allowed. Oh, I'm not allowed. That's outside of my scope of authority. I don't have the authority. Like, so where in this system is the glitch? Why is the political will missing to actually implement all of our wins?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes in information and informing yourself as Canadians, because I think it's a little while ago, I said I let Canadians know where they could go look on the specific claims website, because the government was forced in 2016 was forced to start putting out that information. They were not publicly stating that. And by the way, that website is behind. I think for 2 years, it has stated those same amounts, that when there's more claims, so the number is higher. It's about informing the Canadian public. It's, when I look at our younger generations in Canada, they seem to get it. Why does it always seem like our youth get it? So that's why I'm like, okay, those next generations, this Canada is going to look different.
But you know what, Lowa? I don't know. Maybe I'm grumpy actually. Like though the youth that get it today turn into tomorrow's bureaucrats, and they're not like the bureaucrats that are there now. When they were young in the 60s and 70s and a part of the whole peace movement, and all that, I bet you they got it.
Yeah.
And life happened, and now they're working in a bureaucracy that pigeonholes them into this little square, and I'm just a peon. I've had people say that to me. I got no power.
Yeah.
And so then I want to just end, and we got a few minutes left. I like to try to keep on time. I want to end with the thoughts I was having around social justice. So why is there no revolution in Canada to change this with us? With us. Well, first of all, Canadians are lazy. They, as human beings, they won't spend more than 30 seconds on TikTok, and all of us are like that. Me too. I'm not just saying it's other people. I'm not othering anybody, but I've had to develop the skill to sit in uncomfortable knowledge. Knowledge that I'm uncomfortable with, in order to affect change, in my mind, and so Canadians aren't willing to do anything other than listen to the 30-second soundbite.
Yeah. I know you're saying that my current reality is something different. And what I mean by that is I have been training people for 27 years. And I'll say, in cultural competence, Indigenous awareness training, those types of things. I have seen that needle move, probably decades in 3 years. I know Canadians want to help. I know Canadians want to change. And it's about informing them on how they can.
So what do you tell them? In 3 minutes, what do you tell them?
Wrap it up. In 3 minutes, well, really what I tell them is the Indian Act still exists and what's going to happen. And one guy in Saskatchewan told me, I am now going to ask every mayor that's running for mayor, council, MLA, MPs, I'm going to ask them what their Indigenous platform is. And he said, my whole life, I've never done that. I'm going to. Nice. So I will say Canada is different, and people are asking questions. That's where it starts. And so it is there. I know more people. When I was younger, yes, there was more unconsciousness, I'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
When today there's more consciousness than ever. And we need those allies. And
Mm-hmm.
we need to work on connecting with them. We need to work on working with them. And how are we
Mm-hmm.
going to work forward? And it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever said that in my life. I have felt the opposite many times. I do know it's out there. I'm not saying it's not. I just don't
Mm-hmm.
look at that side. I work with people who want to work with me,
So you work with the willing, you work with the
with the
willing.
willing. And there are more
Yeah.
willing today than there are ever
Yeah.
have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
are more
I, I
willing today than there
actually,
ever
I
have been.
actually agree with you. And you know that about me, that I'm one of the Indigenous people that's willing to engage in these difficult conversations,
Yeah.
and grow the love and trust between our differences that's not there, and
Mhm.
so it's a decision though, and I'm encouraged every time a non-Indigenous person uh, genuinely works to inform themselves, because it's not my responsibility to inform them. They need to do their best to come to the conversation at least somewhat informed, you know,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing. So it's been my practice. I think this is episode 8, to end off with you. Yeah, I know, I'm getting there. It's 8. I mean, you've probably done like 1,000, but uh, with giving you a few minutes just to make some closing comments, like, because you know how our culture's like that. We don't want to leave.
Well, thank you so much, Joan. It's been a great conversation, and I think that one, I want to tell our youth that there is hope. Many of our nations across Canada, our youth are still dealing with many issues. We have high rates in every area of every kind. There is hope. There is hope. I see it. It's there. It's coming. We have more information out there than ever before. I want to let our people know that we've been through our hardest times. It's only going to get better from here. We went through COVID. We had a very hard time in COVID. The world is opening up again. We're gathering again. We're coming together. There is strength in numbers. So I want people to know that. And the biggest part, when I had talked earlier and I said, is looking after self. It is about that. And you, in the little space that you're in, you can breathe. It's about breathing. It's about calming your system. It's about treating people with care and understanding. We're all on this journey. Some people are more informed than others in certain areas, but it's not about those. When our family systems are broken apart with residential school systems, it's now about repairing that. How am I going to repair? What am I doing to repair and treat people kinder, to treat people with more understanding? I was talking to somebody two weeks ago, and they had lost two immediate family members within, a couple of weeks. I think every First Nations Indigenous family across this nation can say those types of things. Like, we are dealing with so much grief. We're dealing with so much loss. We're dealing with so many things. So there is hope out there, and it is about taking care of yourself and then those around you. I do not take what I do in my life lightly. I take it, I do know that our youth are watching us. Our youth need role models. We need to be role modeling those good things that are going on, and the good things that we're doing with our lives, so we can continue to give hope to our younger people. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Couldn't have said it better. So I'm still evolving and developing in this podcast, but I decided quite quickly that one thing for sure, Brave Indigenous Conversations was all about the earrings, because that's another addiction I have. And so this morning, I don't know if you can see them, but they are stunning. And the artist is, she described herself. I contacted her and said, "How would you like me to describe you?" She said she's a Tahltan bead artist, singer songwriter, and her name is Elaine. I might say this wrong. Jakesta. And on Facebook, her Facebook page is Elaine Dana Cho. So Elaine, Elaine, and then Dana, Dana, and Cho, Cho. And her in this piece, these just called me. I walked past her toes, a boom, I could not buy them. They have caribou hoof in the middle, and I just loved her color combinations. And yeah, and I love that she used these long hoops. I just experienced them as so elegant. And yeah, and then the other thing I want to say as we close is that you can see the website there underneath my name, and if you're listening, it's NAKINACALL.com. And one of my good sisters, heart sisters, encouraged me to invite you because I'm paying right now because I'm learning. I have a virtual assistant, $600 for the training to learn how to do this and help get things posted. And because I wanted to do it well, I didn't want to just press the button and start talking. So, and then the work we're doing here on the land with my husband and the young people that are at our camp. Um, we do this through a lot of volunteer work, and there's now a donate button at our website where you can go and contribute to the work that my husband Brian Jack and I are doing to make the world a better place, or whatever the fancy thing to say is. And this came to me when you were talking about hope. I think hope stands for help other people evolve. Hope other
Fantastic.
people help other people evolve. All right. Love you, Loa.